Actually, I came up with this topic for, well, first of all, for one reason, but there are really two. So the one reason is that I'm just ending up at the moment very often to deal more with the corporate organizational level and trying to establish the Agile value system there. So not so much anymore dealing with what's happening inside the project. And that's why I thought I really want to share what I've learned there, but also I want to share all the puzzles I'm still having. So I don't provide a lot of answers here, it's also a lot of questions. And so we'll see if it's still helpful for you to learn about these questions. Now, this is why I brought this talk. However, what led me to that topic, these are two reasons. So one reason is that for a lot of projects which have successfully implemented Agile, I have seen several times that the company, all the departments, different levels on the organization around those projects, they said, oh, what you're doing there, that's really cool. And it seems it's working. We want to do that as well. So it's because it works so well, they want to scale it to the organizational level in different areas. And the other reason is maybe more the negative reason, which is, well, the projects say we could be much more beneficial if the company around us wouldn't put so much burden on us and so many constraints on us, and we cannot get the whole profit or benefit from what we are doing because the organization doesn't support the values we are supporting. So two reasons why I believe this is happening at the moment, that Agile is going more to the corporate level. And again, I have to repeat that I'm not providing a lot of answers, maybe a few ideas and experiences, but also like puzzles. Okay. So, and this, yeah, it is working. So I have a little agenda. First, I want to look into different processes inside the enterprise, what they are doing, how I see them. Then the integration of the organizational processes. Trust and transparency is a big one probably. And then supporting individual development, and this is the area where HR especially plays a bigger role. So just for you, what's coming up. Looking at the processes in the enterprise. First of all, the organizational structure. Well, there's a reason why we have that. The idea was always, well, we want to combine the forces and make, and the knowledge, of course, and the experience, and make that available to all others who might need them. No matter what it is, it can be operations, controlling, QA, whatever it is. So having an organizational structure in terms of departments, linear departments, typically has that idea to assemble all the knowledge and wisdom experience at one place and make it available for others, which is a good idea, I think. However, it seldom really works out. Very often what I see is what's happening is that the departments start to control each other instead of supporting and serving each other. So it kind of turned into something else and into something different than it was originally thought of, or what was the original goal. So the way I am dealing with it, actually I had once the experience, and I will also refer to that a few times. Once the experience where we really managed to, well, we still are doing that, to turn the organization around. So creating different structures in the organization, and maybe just for you why this happened in that case was because that company, an ERP provider, well, creator, producer, not the big one. Not the German big one, no. They just had this, or they just have, luckily they still have this one product, the ERP system. And this means the whole company is shaped around this product, meaning if product development changes, which it has, changing to an agile way, this just means the whole company has to do something about that as well, because the company just has that one product. There's no other reason for the company to be there, and therefore it's kind of naturally came that we had to change it around. However, that's not my normal situation. My normal situation is that there is a really large company, like in Germany it would be like Siemens, or in I don't know, probably around here, not exactly here, but Sweden it would be more something like Ericsson or so really the large ones. And we just do in one place establish agile development, but we still have to deal with all the departments. So what we are doing is we try to bring them in and talk to them as soon as possible, so integrate them early on and ensure that they still have their position and place, but also that we demand a service and support from them, and we don't accept that they are controlling us. So it's more a partnership relationship that we are creating right from the beginning, which is often different for them. And very often I experience that they say, well, this is cool that you're talking to us that early in the process, because normally all of those surrounding departments, they are only talked to at the very end when the project is finished. And so this is a different thing, meaning, and I will come back to that as well, probably several times, meaning that they are stakeholders just like other stakeholders around us. Misunderstanding the Agile Manifesto. I'm not sure if you have recognized the mistake that I put on this slide already. Give you some time to recognize it. You saw it, very good. We have one who recognized the mistake, very good. Okay, so the point is, very often people think that it's more important to have the processes in place and ensure that the processes are really working the way they should. And so in the really large organizations, there's then often even a separate department. Agile once called them famously the methodology police. We have those often called like methodologies and approaches or something like that, and it's like a separate department. The same thing is happening for all different technologies, tools, and so on. So again, remember what I said at the beginning. There's a good reason to have that, because you want to assemble all the knowledge at one place and provide that support to others. But it turns out to be more a controlling thing than a helping thing. And same with tools, technologies. Actually, and I'm not sure if you're happy to hear that, but I see this also happening with Scrum. So that the company decides for Scrum, and then, well, okay, the methodology police is now ensuring everyone is really following that Scrum process exactly how we think it should be done. This isn't Agile, I think. It's not at all Agile. And we really have to remember that and ensure that Agile is about, it has to fit to the actual needs. And the actual needs is always, well, it's not that we want people to be happy and like their job. That's hopefully the case, but we want to provide business value. That's the reason. We want to maximize the business value. And that's why we need a process that helps us to do that. And typically, if we are able to do that, then people like their job as well better. So that's kind of a second thing to it. Okay, that means everything might differ. And I give you a few examples about how, for example, processes can differ. I had, I think several times the experience, well, we had a larger project, and within that project we had like maybe 10 teams or so. Some of them quite big, others quite small. And small, you might even think maybe this isn't really a team. But for various reasons, we thought this is the right size, and the right size was something like 2 or 3 people. Well, with 2 or 3 people sitting in one room, I'm on the one hand uncertain why they would need a Scrum Master. It just, okay. The other thing is, when they start to run a daily scrum, I think something is wrong. Something is completely wrong. If they are sitting in that same room, they should know what's going on. This is a smell. If it's a team so small and they are sitting together and they are working together, it seems they are not working together. So we have a problem. Another example about architecture framework platform services, which I just had recently, so it happens also sometimes. So there was a decision from the enterprise which runs many different product developments. So it's a mix of software and hardware development, and they decided on a specific framework. So they decided everyone has to build on that framework, so we have a common platform, which, well, generally this could make sense, right? However, there was this one project, well, let's start in a different way. So it's medical product development in various ways, not the Siemens, so I didn't mention the name of that company. And most of the devices were like really huge machines, laboratories by themselves and things like that. So, and the framework was exactly for that, like these huge devices. And then there was this project, this other project, which was more web application where it is analyzing also different values that get into the system. I'm uncertain what it was, maybe some plot analysis, whatever it was. And they were still forced to use this framework, which didn't make sense at all because it was a completely different world they were living in. But still, they were forced to do that. So there's often, like, I don't know, stupid stuff happening, and that's also organizational influence on the different projects. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the organizational processes and how maybe to integrate them. And maybe you've realized now already that maybe I don't give enough answers. But here are a few recommendations at least. So in the places I'm working in, we can never just get started and work on the system and then, well, sprint after sprint deciding, well, maybe now the business value is good enough and therefore we ship. We always, before we start, have to say, like, this is when we deliver the first release, and this will roughly be in that release. And then a lot of stuff around that is starting. It depends on the business we're in. So it might be that, okay, we align that with a fair that's coming up or something. So we do have to provide some kind of estimate early on. And at that point in time, typically the team is not there. The team is busy doing some other projects. So it might even be it's long before the actual project starts because it's just bidding for a business proposal or so, and we still have to provide any kind of number. Now the problem is always when then development starts, everyone is upset about those numbers. Because, well, we haven't given those numbers and they're not correct. Whatever estimate is correct, I don't know. But still, the thing I believe we really should do is using those estimates, and I don't really like to call them estimates because they are not, using those as a budget. So saying, okay, this is what we promised in that first release, and therefore we can only develop that much so that we are not running over budget and time. So typically, what's in that release at the time where the budget was created, it doesn't say clearly what's exactly in detail in that release. It says roughly what's in it. And this is also how we should treat it. I can imagine that it's not really news to a lot of you. The thing is our attitude to it. So our attitude to it, we have that with our own estimates often, and we ask then the PO to prioritize, so we know we descope more or less in order to stay within our own estimates, but the same should be true with the estimates that somebody else has given. And this is the kind of maybe the novel thing. So it's not an estimate, it's a budget, or it is like an investment we want to take or put into that part of the development. That's how we should regard this. Very much related to that is how to deal with the legal department. As you probably know, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know much about that. The first thing that should be still clear with all the contracts that are made is that we have to accept these interdependencies between time, scope, the resources, which is the money and the people and technology, technical constraints, and of course the quality. And whenever we make a change in one of the variables, it has an effect on one of the variables. And that should be clear for everyone. And so it definitely should go into the contract. So if we say we want that release be out earlier, it means there is less in it. Or if we want to have more functionality, well, it will either take longer, the quality will go down, or we have to leave something else out. It has to be a conscious decision. Of course, the Agile decision again would be de-scoping. The point is that it has to be clear for the legal department. But this is not the only thing. What I find even more important is that in the contracts, well, maybe it's not directly in the contracts, at least that's not how I did it, again, because I'm not a lawyer. But what we did often was writing up an addendum to the contract where we as well put in all the things we value. What is important for us? Values have to be there, because they mark how we will decide once we have to make a decision. And if we all agree on the same values, it's not so difficult to do that, really. And maybe there one thing here, which is, including the obligations of the customer. As you might know, I mentioned it briefly, a few sentences back. I'm from Germany, and in Germany we have as the governmental official process model process called the V model. Maybe some of you have heard about that, so this is like the official thingy. There had been a revision a few years back, and part of that revision was that for the first time they had a statement there saying that the customer is part of development, in that sense that the customer has to provide feedback and help finding out what's really required. And this is really, I think, great that finally something like that is in a process, like an official process, and where governments rely upon. Because before that it was always, well, the customer states at the beginning, this is what I want, and then leave me alone and just do stuff and come back to me. And now we're saying, well, definitely we need the feedback, because otherwise we cannot be successful. This means also, if it's now not a V model, then even more so, we have to put in the contract that the feedback from the customer is an absolute requirement. So even if you let most of the contract in place how it is already. So coming up with a few other things. Marketing and sales. Well, one thing is that very often they just rule the world. It's really kind of what that telco development manager once said. It's just they dictate how much has to go in the project, in the product, and what are the coolest features, and how can we sell that in the best way. And if we listen to marketing and sales all the time, it's obvious. Then we had that one of the force variable, quality will go down, because nobody wants to investigate in that, because that's nothing we can sell at first sight. Well, later on they will come and say, well, but it doesn't really work. But they will not show up in marketing and sales. They will show up somewhere else. So that's why they don't care, and they still will dictate that. So this is probably again something which is not really news to you, but we have to ensure that because of that reason that QA is really part of the process right from the beginning, because we won't have time later on. And I want to point out what I believe it was Dave Thomas at maybe 2 years back or 3 years back at the Agile conference, where he made a statement that we should assure that there are no non-functional requirements. And the point is not that there are really no non-functional requirements. It's just if we call them like that, they sound like they don't provide any functionality, which is just not true. And they also sound like nobody really wants that. There's no stakeholder who really wants those. And that's also not true. And so what we need to do is to bring those non-functional requirements into the, well, real requirements. And the way we did that in several projects was, well, on the one hand, it's part of the definition of done. And on the other hand, it's part of the acceptance criteria for the different user stories. And I believe that's the only way how they will get addressed and get the right priority. Whenever you list them separately somewhere, they will never make it. Well, at the very end, they will. But then it's probably too late and too difficult to bring those in. Okay, operations. Well, first of all, operations is just a stakeholder as anybody else. And I don't want to really go into details. There's a lot of happening at the moment about continuous delivery, DevOps. Joshua's talking about lean startup later on. So this is the focus on that. However, even if you are not changing radically to continuous delivery, you still should ensure that operations is just a stakeholder and treat them like a regular customer and not only talking to them at the very, very end. So if things are changing, so delivering early regularly, something has to happen here as well, and we cannot ignore that. So I've seen too many projects struggle because of that. So there was a regular releasing, but it never went out of the door because of that.
Is it not an option to make operations just part of your team?
Okay, isn't it an option to make operations part of the team? Actually, this is true for, I believe, all those organizational or business processes I'm talking about here. You could also say, why isn't marketing and sales part of your team? And even if we move on later on, why isn't HR part of your team? And yeah, it would be cool if it would be really interdisciplinary and cross-functional through all the departments. The point for me is that most of the times I don't have the power to turn the whole organization around. So like the example I give at the beginning, like in Siemens, I cannot tell them, okay, now you have to provide operations within our teams. They stare at me. So I can do that with smaller companies or with the one with their ERP systems or so. This is just their single product, and therefore they have to shape around that product what makes the most sense, and then they come up with something like that. So I guess what I'm saying is it would be great to solve it this way. I can't because I don't have the power to do that.
So basically, if you can't make someone part of your team, you assign them as a stakeholder.
That's a very good point. If I can't, so what he was saying, if I can't make somebody part of my team, I assign them the role of the stakeholder. And that's true in almost all cases. At the moment, I'm not sure if it's really true in all cases, but maybe it is. So it's really kind of backing up. But making them part of stakeholder and having more a relationship that's based on providing a service often helps much better into, well, improving the collaboration we are having and going away from this controlling structure or throwing over wall approaches and things like that. And here we are, customer orientation. That's exactly the point. So all those business processes around us actually, as he suggested, should be treated more as stakeholders, customers, and therefore we provide a service. Sometimes, of course, it should also be the other way around. We are a customer for the others, so they should provide a service for us, so it can go either way. And therefore, this should be as well clear in the stories, for example. So every feature or story isn't for an end user only. Business value isn't marked by end user value only. There are a lot of other people who have an interest in that product, and they are as important as other people are. And we have to acknowledge that. Trust and transparency. And I want to apologize at this moment that I think probably the next 2 slides are maybe boring, because I want to go over something I find is too important before I make the point I want to make. And I'm sure you all know that. That's why I apologize here. So, Agile is based on trust. That's at least what a lot of people say. So we want to have a trusted relationship amongst the team, also to the customer and to all the people around us whom we are working with. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that, well, building up trust always works that way, that somebody has to make the first step and trust somebody else. So it just doesn't emerge naturally. It always is created by somebody is giving trust, and then trust is emerging and evolving. And I have this quote from Tom DeMarco, and he shared this story, I think it was last year at the OOP conference in Germany, where he told this little story. I'm not sure if you can relate to that, but his daughter made her driver's license. And of course he was a proud father and thought, well, now she's grown up and this was all fine. So maybe they even celebrated together and so on. And then there came this Saturday evening where his daughter came up to him and said, well, Dad, I want to go out with my friends. Can I have your new BMW to go there? And I'm not a really good actor, but the way he described it and showed it to us, it was so obvious that he really, really struggled with the decision. And then finally he kind of bite his tongue and move the keys over the tables and, okay, yeah, you can have it, right? But how can she ever approve that she is trustworthy if not anyone is trusting her? So, and this is true as well, of course, in a working relationship. So it's always somebody has to make the first step. Whatever this is. Interesting. It's not me. But that's the one thing I want to say. The other thing about trust is that, in my experience, it's created by open, honest, transparent communication. So these are the values that have to be in place in order that a trusted relationship is really emerging. And if one of them isn't really there, it will not work. And I guess you all have experienced that as well. If the wrong things or the dishonest things are made transparent, that doesn't help anyone. And often you can see if trust is not there, if people try to formalize things. So they say, well, we have to make a note that he said this and that, then because later on he will otherwise say he never said so, and things like that. So to put as much formalism into whatever we are doing as possible is a very good sign for a mistrusted relationship. And maybe we should then work on something else and not on providing more rules and formalism here. That's the next kind of repetition here, like transparency. Why do we want that? We want to have shared ownership, shared knowledge. We don't want to have pet monopolies. We want that everyone can contribute to the same thing we are working on, right? And, well, what I've seen sometimes is that if things are made transparent, but trust is not there, then this is regarded as controlling. And the example I have is something that just occurred to me recently. So I went to a customer and I haven't been there much. So I went in and was showed around, and so they had everywhere those big screens where we could see like unit tests passed and failed, and sprint burn downs from team X and Y. So how are they doing in order to burn down the tasks they have planned for the sprint, right? So this was there. I see a lot of people nodding, so you know that thing. So these were like, I'm not sure, like 4 huge buildings, and in all of the buildings you could see, for all the Agile teams, not for the other teams, you could see all this information. At first I thought, oh, that's cool, they're making this really transparent, and so everyone can see, and I guess that's also a motivation and blah blah blah. The teams hated it. They really hated it. And the reason was that management used those things, like whenever they saw, well, unit test didn't pass or sprint burn down, you will not make the sprint, they ensure that they know that they really have to do a better job. Well, that was a polite way to expressing what happened there. So it was really obvious that the transparency lacked the trust, and therefore it didn't fulfill in any kind the need or the intention of it. And so my recommendation in that case was really, as long as it is like that, get rid of those screens. They are not helpful here. It's just the opposite, right? So they are hindering the progress. And as well, maybe you want to think about that in general. So talking of Scrum and also XP and most of the other Agile processes, we have this notion of the iteration, and the iteration as a means of protecting the team to actually getting their job done. Therefore, we should also always trust them to get their job done, meaning everything that's happening inside that iteration is under the self-organization of that team. And it's not something that has to be reported wherever to. So whenever reporting is happening there, it's for all the team members and not for anyone else. Because we rely upon that they are able to steer themselves if they recognize that they are not on track. And it's not that somebody from outside has to jump in there. So that's counterproductive otherwise. Therefore, only like the progress report at the end of the sprints is that what should be reported, like for example, upwards the hierarchy. Okay, that's good. Timing seems to be good. Supporting individual development, that's, I believe, one of my favorite topics. And you will, in a minute, you will see why, I'm sure. So, first of all, speaking of agreement on objectives. A good friend of mine, he always says if he's working with teams and somebody makes something really stupid, so he just can't explain himself, why did he do that? Often it's also like technical things, so why did he now use that library, which we don't really need? Then he always makes a bet. And his bet is, I bet that this is in the agreements on objectives for that person, that he has to learn about that library. And the really, weird thing is that he always won the bet. It's always like that. Which means, well, the way most of the time objectives are handled, they are not helpful. Again, it's something that I understand why we would have that, where we want to have that. It's absolutely obvious and clear, and it should help people to, develop themselves. So personal development is here the topic, right? So it's absolutely useful, but the way we are using it, it's just stupid. One thing, and I jump to the last point here, one thing is why it is stupid. Whenever something is connected to bonus, to money, then people just do things although they know that's not a good decision at the moment. But if my bonus depends on it, of course I do that. And I think that's human. And the other thing is that very often they are just too long-term oriented, so short-term objectives make much more sense, and also if the objectives, like other stories, are developed from the person who really wants them, that's the one who wants to reach the objective. So also asking the people then to define the acceptance criteria. But I assume you are not the one who can change that. So I just want to do my rant on that. And now we are coming to my favorite slide. That is my favorite slide. Actually, I've been running out of space because, as you see, I have the whole Kanban stuff is left out here. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave them out. I just ran out of space. Okay, well, what to do with that? Well, first of all, I want to show you something else which relates to that, which is how Agile Alliance puts itself to these certifications. And the Agile Alliance says more or less, well, we don't believe in them the way they are created at the moment. And also that we believe more in that it's important that people are able to adjust, adapt, and keep learning. So getting a snapshot from whatever they have acquired in terms of knowledge for a given moment isn't really helpful. So this is, I think, a strong statement the Agile Alliance made there. For the certification, I think I have to, because I like that slide so much, so I go back to that, right? We want to see that. I want to share one thing that I'm still struggling with. So, of course, I'm also certified. I'm a certified scuba dive master. So I also have the master in it, right? So very cool. And I often thought, what would it mean if my education as a scuba dive master would have been the same as, let's pick the one that's obvious, the Scrum Master. So the way that this would have worked would be like, okay, I'm going to a 2 days class, we know all that. Then there's somebody who tells me about, well, buoyancy in the water, also some physical laws that take place once you are underwater, what to do with the pressure that's higher than in the air, right? Also some medical stuff, what can happen medical-wise, how you can secure somebody else, and of course the technical equipment, how the stuff really works and so on. So that's, I would learn all that, that's wonderful. And of course I would make a test after the 2 days where I should state, well, did I really learn what that instructor told me? It's very cool. That's still fine. But the point is, now after those 2 days, I would be allowed, or people would treat me as somebody who is enabled or capable of leading a group of people underwater and ensuring the security for them and the safety, I think is the right word. I'm not sure if you recognize that yet, but I haven't been in the water yet, right? And that's the real dangerous thing, at least I think. Okay, I have to say. So this is today my rant over a lot of things. I have to use that. Okay. I had this whole topic in individual development, personal development, because it's part of that, I believe. So we all want to learn and grow and get better, improve, and all of that. And HR can take a role there. They can take a role, well, of course, also by requiring that people are certified something, or they can't let go of that and requiring what they really can, and maybe using, actually, although I did that rant, I had really great experiences with the certifications, using them as an incentive after somebody has been on a project for a year or so. So that's a good way of motivating people. Okay, so this is one thing. I think I want to share a story about HR because I'm still so impressed about that. So it's a customer of mine who approached me saying, well, maybe you've heard things like that. Their clients say they are not releasing often enough, and therefore their clients say they probably should turn into an Agile company and do Agile development in order to be more flexible and faster and blah, blah, blah. And so they read a little bit about Agile, and once they called me, there was one person who was passionate about Agile anyway for a while. So actually this phone call is probably 4 years ago, so it's not like the parent news story, but it was really amazing, and it's still the only story I have in that area. The other person who was on the phone was somebody from HR, the head of HR, because they said, well, we have looked into what Agile really is, and we recognize it has to do a lot with personal development. And therefore we think we have to support that. And that's actually what they did. So one thing that I did was enabling different communities in the companies so that they can have an experience exchange, who is working with what and what's helping, what's hindering, and all of that across different projects. And the other thing is helping them really to become more self-responsible. For example, what they did as well was everyone who wanted to help and support other projects once you have done your own project as whatever, as a developer in an Agile team, and you want to help others. So we called this a peer coaching concept. They sent the people to a training where they learned what it means to be a coach. Nothing to do with IT or anything, right? But it's what does it mean to be a coach? And so they did a lot of things in that area, meaning also a big emphasis on soft skills and so on. And I still wonder, why is this, to my knowledge, the only company where the introduction and the spreading of Agile has been supported by HR and just put it to IT only, because that's not the only thing we need here. And of course I also believe I have at least a part of the answer. And one answer I'm having, that in a lot of companies I'm in, I often don't see HR as, well, let's say, being enabled, maybe time-wise, let's put it this way, to really do personal development. They are too busy just ensuring interviews and whatever, doing all the regulation stuff, and so they can't do their, what I would think is their real job. And that's probably one of the reasons. But I guess the other reason is as well that we don't bring it to the attention of them that this could be a great leverage to move on with that. Okay, and I come to my final thoughts, and this is really cool because I want to share a last thing here, which is we are talking about at the cooperative level, at the organizational level, and how Agile is maybe working there or maybe not. I really believe there is a reason why Agile is still successful. People are still talking about it, although it's not the newest kid on the block anymore. We know that as well, right? It's around for a while, but still it seems to be successful, and still people are doing it. It changes what they are doing. If they're doing XP at the beginning, then Scrum, now maybe Kanban, and then maybe they start from the beginning again and might do again XP or so. It doesn't really matter, but the Agile as an attitude, as a culture, is something that's still spreading. And I believe there's a good reason for that. And the good reason, now it might be weird, I don't know, for you, is that people say at the moment we are at the beginning of the third industrial revolution. And meaning that the whole way we are working in our industry all over the world will change. And there are already some signs, and I'm not talking about the signs that we heard in the keynote. Maybe some of them are related. But, well, first of all industrial revolutions have started based on energy. So there was energy available, the way we got this, and that turned the industrial revolutions. And what's happening at the moment is that energy most likely will be more decentralized, which also has an effect on how industry is run. So that we are getting away from centralized organizations more to networks, and which means also that we have to trust other nodes on the network. So trust will get a big one, collaboration will get a big one, communication is a big one, and all of these things I'm saying at the moment is not that it's really me as Jutta, as the Agile coach, is saying that. That's what people say who claim about or talk about the third industrial revolution, who don't know, I believe, anything about Agile, or they don't care. But I think this is the reason why Agile is still spreading and growing, because it fits exactly in that movement that's happening at the moment. And maybe not so positive thing about that they're saying, well, it probably takes till 2050, 50, till we are really there. So I'm not sure. I'm probably not an Agile coach at those days. Yeah, I know. And still, I think this is a movement that's taking place, and there's probably a reason why people talk about Agile also on different levels, also on like the organizational level, the corporate level, and why it is important to talk about this right now, because these values are the ones that are brought forward at the moment. Maybe one last note to that is that another thing why people think the third industrial revolution is happening is that because I think it's called the generation Y or even Z already, see, they have been growing up, or they are growing up without hierarchical structures. Other than like people like me, where I at least believe, people like me, we grew up in like sports club or maybe in church communities, all with a very hierarchical structure, organization. That's not the thing anymore. People, they network and they get together and collaborate, and then they go leave each other alone again, and then they come together again. So it's more like the swarming thing or so. And this is how they grew up, and this is also the reason why it's very likely that they don't want to work in hierarchical organizations anymore. And people recognize that already and say it's difficult to really get people who are willing to work in these like departmental structured organizations, and therefore something has to change. Okay, I think I leave you with these thoughts, dreaming of the third industrial revolution, maybe, that's what I do. And I want to thank you very much, and I hope you will have a great conference, a lot of inspirations and good talks, networking. Thank you.